Welcome to the Martin Bailey Photography Podcast. It's May 14, 2021, and this is episode 741. I just finished recording a wonderfully inspiring conversation with my friend David duChemin. David is a world and humanitarian photographer, a best-selling author and international workshop leader, and I'm always inspired by our conversations. But today really hit the mark for me on so many levels, as you'll hear. I won't give away any more at this point, so let's just jump in, and I hope you enjoy my conversation with David duChemin. So David, welcome back to the show. It's been too long, my friend.
Martin Bailey, it has been way too long. It's good to hear your voice again.
Yeah, it's we were just chatting before we hit the record button. It's probably been a good 3 years or so, and that does seem way too long. But it's nice to be back chatting with Mr. duChemin. And we've got a lot to talk about, and we've planned virtually zero of it. So
nothing. This is a wing and a prayer, baby.
And that's how I like it. I always enjoy my conversations with you, both in person and over the ether. So I'm looking forward to this. Tell us
Me
first.
too. And it was 5 o'clock here, so this is perfectly coincided with happy hour. I realize you've probably only had your first cup of coffee over there in Tokyo, but I've got a dram of whiskey beside me, so who knows where this is going to go.
I would love to have a dram of whiskey. What's your favorite whiskey these days?
Do you know, I'm drinking an actual Scottish whiskey right now, but my favorite whiskeys, hands down, are the Japanese whiskeys.
Oh, there's some good ones.
Oh, very good. Yeah, the Yamazaki is nice. My favorite are from the Nikka distillery.
Oh, yeah. Oh, excellent.
I love them. Love them. They make probably 5 different whiskeys that I think are just exceptional.
You know, I have a friend in Hong Kong who sent me a book, 101 of the best whiskeys to drink before you die, or something like that. And it's an amazing book. And he got me sort of a little bit into various whiskeys, and the best one that he recommended to me, if I can remember what it's called, I think it was Talisker or Talisker. I think
Talisker,
it is.
Yeah.
And
okay.
that is. I mean, I'm on my second bottle now this week, and it's absolutely amazing. He also told me to drop a couple of pieces of ice in and just a splash of water to open it up. And that's now become my favorite way to drink, and probably my favorite whiskey as well.
Yeah, you'll get kicked out of some whiskey bars for putting ice into your whiskey in some places.
Yeah.
But I say it's horses for courses, and I like you. I like to put a little bit of ice in the summer anyway. Talisker is beautiful. I spent some time at their distillery on the Isle of Skye in Scotland, and they make a very nice. I used to not jokingly call it my daily whiskey, but I've learned that people that don't know me somewhat misunderstand the concept there. So my question about a book that is 100 whiskeys to drink before you die.
Yeah.
Like, what are you going to do with the other 265 days in the year? And how short is this lifespan going to be, really?
Yeah.
It seems like there should be many more whiskeys in there if we're going to take it to the end of our lives.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing is, I mean, Nick, the gentleman that I mentioned, he has, I don't know, 20 or 30 bottles put by all the time, and he'll just have one drink a day. And but he's really enjoying it. I've only got 1 or 2 bottles, one cheap one that I'll mix with Coke and stuff, and then another one that I'll drink either straight or on ice. And it's I just like to have something nice put by, and I think that's the thing. You don't necessarily. He went, but like a bull at a gate at it, and trying to drink as many as he could, and not in huge volumes, but he was trying to get this and that, and I think it's just a nice thing to do. It's almost like a collection, and it's got to be better than train spotting.
Well, some people collect postage stamps, right?
Yeah, right. Excellent though. So, what have you been up to?
Well, Martin, like everyone, I've been staring at the four walls of my office and studio, and most of my time is given over to completely losing my mind at this point. Um, I stare longingly at photographs of Kenya and think,
Oh,
why did I take it for granted?
oh, I
Um,
know.
it's just the last year, but it has been really productive. I, I'm very conscious of the fact that the pandemic has affected people in some very different ways. Some of them very difficult.
Mm.
We've been very lucky in the sense that we're not desperate for making rent or finding groceries or anything. So I've spent the last year riding my bike and swimming and getting into shape. I figured once the writing was on the wall for how long we were all going to be stuck wherever we are,
Mm.
I went like I doubled down. I'm usually, if someone had said, if my doctor says, are you active, David? I would say, I'd cross my fingers behind my back and say, well, yeah. Meaning I had a very active imagination, perhaps, but not like actually, doing things. And I decided this was it. So I've been swimming 6 to 8 kilometers a week and
Wow.
cycling 100 kilometers a week, and just kind of taking care of my physicality, which I think has really helped my state of mind.
Mm.
Right at the beginning, I don't know exactly the day all of this dropped for you in Japan, but in North America, it was March 17th. And the reason I remember that date is because that was the official date that my most recent book was released to the world.
Mm.
And it coincided exactly with the day that Amazon said, we're not going to be sending a lot of books right now.
Mm.
So it was just literally the most inauspicious time I could possibly have launched a book.
Mm.
Um, and that kind of started it off. And so I've made a couple of courses, and I've just stayed busy sort of feeding my audience, the people that come to me for photography help, and something that on my better days might be called wisdom. I've been concentrating on writing articles. Like you, I've been doing virtual lectures for camera and photography clubs around the world,
Mm.
which has been really fun. I tell Cynthia, usually it happens around this time in the evening, 5 o'clock in the evening on the West Coast. And I will tell Cynthia, I'm heading down to the studio, and I'll be in Trinidad and Tobago for the next hour and a half, or
Yeah.
I'll be in Luxembourg, or I've been everywhere. I've been in Australia. I've been in, it's been pretty cool. There are limitations, of course, with Zoom, but just to see some people and talk to people and feel like you're not totally cut off. I don't know
Mm.
about your experience, but I have found it just completely liberating. It's been wonderful.
Mm. I'd not really done any remote teaching or those kind of presentations until this. What was it? I think the first one was for a camera club in Canada last year, and it was great just to get into that and meet people that I would have had no chance of meeting before really until that. But even this year, did a few sessions at the Chicago Live, out of Chicago Live event, and
Mm-hmm.
they'd invited me in the past, but needed me to be there.
Right.
But this year, the whole thing was online, so it's actually opened doors for me there. Um, Unfortunately, I mean, business-wise, I'm probably like with all of my tours going away, I'm probably 80%, 80 to 90% down. We're just finalizing my that last fiscal year's books, and
Mm-hmm.
a couple of months ago, I woke up and I literally fell to pieces in front of the mirror as I had a shave, because I started to think about the fact that I was going to be talking with my accountant that day, and he was going to show me how bad my books are. And
Yeah.
I said to him that the first thing I did when I got onto Zoom with the accountant was said, I don't want to look at my books until the end of the year because this is killing me.
Yeah.
So I literally we stopped doing that. But like you said, it's opened up other doors. There's been able to meet people around the world, make a little bit of money at doing that as well. Has been really, I don't know, it's been liberating in some ways.
Yeah.
I've managed to build a lot of things and do a lot of things that I really wouldn't have had time to do unless this had happened. So, it's the silver lining thing. And as we are both founding members of the Almost Dead Photographers Society, I I think that we're both in many ways terminal optimists. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it's
It's.
good.
I think you and I have both had enough experiences with, with our bodies failing us, or us failing our bodies, that
Mm,
that there's a gratitude there when you train yourself to be grateful even when things are hard. It's not blind optimism. It's not, it's not sort of turning your eyes to the reality of things. It has been a really hard year, and I've
mm,
I've woken up times and thought, oh man, like when all of this happened, and the writing was on the wall for some very big opportunities that I created for myself, tours, conferences that I was producing, and the amount of money that went out the door
mm,
to refunds and even just flights that I'd booked, that I've just found out that Air Canada is finally saying we'll actually send you money instead of these credits you can't use.
mm,
But yeah, I mean, I I hear I can picture myself in your shoes and thinking, as a lot of photographers have this year, you know, things are changing, and
mm,
the the so-called markets that we've relied on, the opportunities that we have pursued to make an income, and to, by doing so, be able to do more of what we make, make
mm,
more photography, make more books, make whatever it is that we do.
mm,
Things have definitely changed, and I've talked to a lot of photographers who are feeling like, whew, I know that they've changed, but I don't know what they've changed into yet.
mm, mm,
They're changing, but the future it's a little foggy right now. I'm trying. I'm sure, like you, I'm trying to put together a safari in Africa. I know you do Namibia. I do
mm,
Kenya, and I'm dying to get back. But even though, and so many of my clients they're Americans, they're almost fully immunized, and they're saying, let's get back to it. I'm going, yeah, it's not that simple.
right.
We still don't know what things look like in Kenya. We still really don't know what it's going to look like in 6 months coming back from Kenya and I have a very international audience. So it's not just people returning to the US, but
Mm,
Canada and
mm,
France and England and who knows where.
mm,
It's a very complicated, and even people that don't do that kind of photography work are, I think, looking around and kind of going, well, it's things dried up,
mm,
and
mm.
what do I do now, is sort of like, that seems to be my prevailing question this year. Is just every day I wake up and go, so what do I do now? Like, specifically, not in a hopeless kind of way, but like in a today, what do I do
Yeah,
today?
yeah.
Not just to engage in busy making work, but actually to move the needle on my business and my craft too. This has actually been a really good opportunity for me to look at old work and consider, my next move. I like to put a fine art book out every couple of years, as opposed to, by that I mean, as opposed to, like a teaching book.
Yeah.
And so I think, I actually today made contact with the printer and said, so how does this work? Like,
Mm,
with us not being able to meet in person, but I really want to start this new project. And I think I'm not a glass half empty or half full kind of guy. I'm more like, well, it's probably both at the same time in some ways, and the
mm.
glass probably has a crack in it anyway. So, I'm a much more complex person than that. But I
Yeah,
do I do like to look at things and go, how can we turn this? How can we at least make something of it?
yeah.
And so in that sense, it's been an interesting year. I know a lot of people have done books. You're getting into micro. What would you call it? Micro photography.
Yeah, I'm still not really comfortable with the terminology.
Okay.
A lot of people call them micrographs or micrography, but to me it seems more like micro photography.
Hmm.
Without the photo part in there, it's because it's still the current way I'm doing this. We're still capturing, light. So I think that
Yeah.
I prefer the word micro photography, but a lot of people use micrography. Kind of back to the mental state sort of thing. I've been having nightmares for the last 6 months that I was in a particularly beautiful location with 12 to 14 participants, which is usually the situation in reality. And I will be sitting in a hotel or somewhere, and for some reason the scene outside cannot be photographed. I've either lost my gear and I start to get people complaining to me because this is not going well. And it's all of the things that I work so hard to not let happen on my tours. And
Mm.
they were all being forced on me every night. And it was getting really, really bad.
Wow.
And the moment I started shooting the first of these photographs through the microscope, the nightmares stopped. And the last few weeks have been bliss, because I'm actually creating. I'm making images that I feel for the first time in a while are pretty creative, and they're feeding my soul. So the nightmares have stopped, which is great. But yeah, I mean, another part of it is because having the time to do it, I was working way too hard on my app, I've still got to do an Android version, which I've started studying up on. But to me, when I start doing app development, it's creative in a way. I'm making things, and of course, it helps to keep the roof over our head, which is exactly the reason why I'm trying to make that work as well. But I find that I get too, I go sort of like heads down, or I say down periscope.
Mm.
And once I'm down periscope, I'm almost unreachable. I can be sitting on the sofa doing it, and my wife can be talking to me. I mean, this is probably a problem with most men anyway. But my wife can be talking to me, and I'll be miles away. I'll be in some 4-dimensional code somewhere,
Mm.
so it's not great for my relationship with my wife, which I value more than anything. And so I thought, you've got to do something that is literally purely creative and feeds your soul again. And that's why I sort of scratched a childhood itch that I'd never looked into a microscope before. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to get one. And I ended up getting 2 different types. But um, it really has been, I've felt more creative this last few weeks than I have in many months. So it's been great.
I love hearing that. That's fantastic. That's
Yeah.
just great.
So I said when we started that we had no plan, and we've already started to touch on this a little bit, but we had one word that we were going to work to, and that was marketing. So, let's sort of take a deeper dive into that. And literally that is all we said. So, what are your current thoughts? I know that you've got a few things that you're into, but as you were saying, things are changing,
Hmm.
and the way we're working is changing, and that of course is going to lead into a natural result that the way we market is probably going to be changing as well. What are your thoughts on this at the moment?
Yeah, well, I have a lot of them. But about 10 years ago, I released, I was, I had a book published called Vision Mongers.
Mm,
And for a lot of photographers, maybe some of those of you that are listening, that was their introduction to my teaching.
mm,
And the subtitle was Making a Life and a Living in Photography. And it was essentially about how do we run a business? How do we market ourselves as photographers? And I've been itching to uh, re-explore that topic because so much has changed since then. I mean, back then I would have said, you're crazy to be on social media. Now I'm not on any form of social media. And
mm,
that's not that I would tell other people you shouldn't be on social, but the environment, the context in which many of us put our work out into market has changed dramatically. So I've been looking at new ways of exploring that, and things have really changed.
mm,
Even over the last year, things have really changed, especially in individual predicaments, people that have had a certain business model that have seen it completely disappear on them. And this is not new. I mean, several years ago, I think it was around 2014 that Facebook, just all of a sudden, the organic reach began to plummet.
mm,
And so people that had built businesses, photography or otherwise, on the idea of Facebook reaching an audience for them, all of a sudden we're like, I'm floundering here. What do I do? Facebook's disappeared, functionally disappeared in terms of its usefulness.
mm,
And so we always, when we bring our goods to market, as it were, and I'll be the first to say I hate the word marketing. I hate talk about markets because it reduces people to a rather abstract kind of concept, and
mm,
that's someone from whom we have the opportunity to earn money. So I like to think more in terms of audiences, but
mm,
just for being unambiguous about what we're talking about,
mm,
the most photographers, if you're going to if you're going to make a living part-time or full-time, you definitely need to consider it. But even those that are like, money's not the big thing. What I really want is impact. You still have to market yourself, because while you're not asking people for money, you are asking for time and attention. And frankly, of the three non-renewable resources in our life, money, time, and attention, money is the easiest to get. It's the time and attention that people really hold on to. And so if you're in that position, you're probably right now beginning to realize that things have changed, that social's made a lot of photographers, and I speak from experience, made a lot of photographers really lazy. It's like, I would talk to photographers. I do some coaching and consulting, and I would talk to people and they're struggling. And I would say, so tell me about what you're doing in terms of putting your work out into the world. And they'd be like, well, I'm working really hard on my social presence. And it sort of, I began to realize people were mistaking the idea of a marketing plan for, quote, I post on social. And it's made people very lazy in terms of all of the other opportunities. There was a statistic I read in a book recently, Martin, that said 7%. It's a legitimate book. It's a few years old, so the numbers may have changed a little bit, but I don't think too much. 7% of word of mouth happens online. And the implication is only 7%, right. 93%. So let's say that's off even by 20%. Still, like 75%, somewhere in that area, is happening of word of mouth, which everyone across the board agrees is the best kind of marketing. No matter what book you read, no matter what their specialty is, like, word of mouth is still going to be the best. 75% of it is happening offline.
Yeah.
So any quote unquote marketing plan that doesn't adjust for that and doesn't understand, I could be doing a lot more to engage my audience, even just if all we do is take that first step and go, let's get our so-called marketing not off of social to the exclusion of social necessarily, but let's go beyond social. So I have a whole sermon about why I'm not on social anymore, but I know a lot of people still like it. They still, they're convinced that they're not distracted by it the way that they are. And I'm going to leave that one alone. But if you're sure you want to stay on social, if you're sure it's got benefits and some kind of return on investment for you, then I would just urge you, fine, keep social around, do whatever you like. Some people, as we said, some people collect postage stamps. So do your thing, but go beyond social. You've got to get into the real world. When's the last time you sat down and asked yourself, who am I to my audience, and what do I provide for them? So that's one area of clarity that I think a lot of people say, I don't have any clarity. I don't know who my audience is. And if you're saying that, you don't actually have a business plan. You don't have a business unless you can say, I know who my audience is and what I provide for them, because that's the foundation. And then how do we build on that? How do we reach those people who aren't on Facebook, and those who are on Facebook? How do we reach them in a way that's frankly much more attention getting than Facebook? When's the last time, for those of you who are listening, when's the last time you were on a podcast relative to your specialty and talking about your passion for that and the experience and the feelings? And like, when's the last time you did some good old fashioned storytelling? When's the last time you just got 12 magazines in that are relevant to what you do as a photographer and took down the submission information and started making contact with editors so that a couple of them might feature you this year or do an interview? When's the last time you found a writer that writes for these and said, hey, I loved the piece that you did on Martin Bailey. I actually do something kind of different, but I thought you might be interested. Here's my story. And get them to go to bat for you with an editor and say, I really think this photographer needs some airtime in our magazine. When's the last time you were out in the world, in some other way than, well, gosh, business isn't coming in, I better put a Facebook ad together? Like, oh my God, I'd just rather stab myself in the eye with a fork. And I value my eyes. I feel like, there's this line in Zoolander where, the older Maury, the agent, he's like, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. I feel like that sometimes when I'm talking to photographers that they have either forgotten or they never knew that there are so many more opportunities out there, because we're talking about people reaching people, and the people that love your wildlife art will be also showing up elsewhere. They will be looking at certain kinds of magazines. They will be watching certain kind of TV shows. And I don't really think that, any of us are all of a sudden going to be, in a David Attenborough special or anything like that. But you've got to think of the whole gamut of all of the podcasts and the magazines, and especially the online stuff, because let's face it, if you're on a radio show, that's nice, but it's like it's on and then it's gone. If you're on a podcast, that's going to last. Like, people will be listening to the archives of Martin Bailey's podcast like long after I'm around. It's going to, unless Martin, your estate shuts it down, these things really do last a long time. And so I'm not really concerned about people trying to hire me when I'm dead. But certainly, if I'm going to spend an hour on, on air with someone, I'll spend it with someone like you, who I know people are going to find this interview for years to come. And that's going to increase my SEO for whatever that's worth. And that could be a whole other conversation, is people spending time and money just like fretting about SEO. Honestly, it doesn't matter. Like, I don't know, Martin, are you full on in SEO, or do you just rely on the fact that you're developing relevant content and, that it's just going to happen? I mean, you've got, how many years of this podcast have you got?
16.
That is astonishing.
Yeah.
That's more time than I think than I've even known how to use a computer. It really is astonishing. And when you think about all of the people that first appeared on your show, there are 16 years of new people that are discovering them. They're going on and they're searching for a certain thing, or they're hearing your podcast and they like your kind of focus. And so you're interviewing people about topics that, interest you and that would appeal to your audience. And so I get people coming to me and becoming part of my audience simply by speaking to your audience. And that kind of perspective, I think, is really helpful.
So, yeah, I mean, regarding SEO, you're similar to the social networks thing. I understand how they work, and I will do things in my own way. Often to the point where, like with SEO, I understand that having people link back to you helps to build trust. And that is only going to happen by doing things like what you're saying. I mean, I'm going to link to your website now. And I know that you've linked to mine in at various times. Those links are valuable. And I also put systems in. Being a sort of a technically minded, I've got a good IT background. So what I do is, the first thing, whenever I'm going to do anything, I try to figure out the way to get the most bang for my time book, not necessarily for my my physical money, But what I do is I make sure that I've got systems in place to help me do a good job with the minimal effort. And so when I release a podcast, I build the post, I put all of the text in and the photos, and I make sure that a few things are in place. I've got plugins that enable me to assign the photograph that will be linked to if someone links to a post, then Facebook, Twitter, anywhere, they'll automatically include a photograph that I've assigned as the featured photo. I make sure that I spend a few minutes to write a description about what the post's about, and that also gets fed in and included with the photo. And I do all of these things that they're going to help people to spread the word, and I guess that's coming back to a kind of a word of mouth thing, but it's only 7%. But I do all of these things that it takes a little bit of effort, but then once it goes out, I use a system called Zapier that will then take my feed and send it to all of the social networks that I'm into. And so a lot of the things I spend the time to automate stuff. And that all helps with my SEO, in that it helps to build trust. I remember one of the big moves that I did years ago, having regular content over a long time, like 16 years of almost weekly posts, is another thing that the search engines like to see. And so for the first few years of me doing my tours, I used to have all of the tours on a separate website. And I thought, you know what? With a little bit of extra effort, I could bring this all into the same website. And then my tours are going to benefit from all of the links and posts about my podcast. I'm putting all of this work in to the podcast as a marketing vehicle. So I needed to get that in. So I closed down my workshops website and I built it all in as just a part of my own site. And that instantly got me more people looking at my tour pages because it was related to a website that was higher trusted than my nobody knows about workshops website. And
Right.
so I did those things, and I think I've done a relatively good job. It's helped me to build a business that is supporting me until the virus came along and changed everything, and we had to start thinking about things differently. But I've been very happy with the fact that my business has grown to what it has, and it's partly down to an understanding of SEO to the point where I know how to do enough to make it work for me. But I don't spend hours online trying to figure out how to do it better. I do the things that I can do relatively easily, with a good understanding of how it all works. But I'm not sort of fanatical. And it's like I said, it's the same with SNS. I will ignore, I'll do one post a week sometimes where it's literally that automated post that I've released a podcast. And that goes out to the social networks. But at the moment, I'm into I'm getting into this micrography thing, and I'm posting once or twice a day with new photos that I'm creating. And it's partly for me at the moment because I'm trying to gauge whether or not people actually like this work, because I ultimately I want to sell some as wall art, and I think it makes really good wall art. So
Yeah.
that's a part of it. But it's also just engaging with people and seeing how people. Because my wife said to me, "Do you think people that have been enjoying your landscapes and your wildlife work, do you think they're going to like this?" And I said, I don't do anything based on what I think people are going to like. I do everything based on what I want to do. And it sounds selfish, but I think that at the end of the day, if I have an emotional connection with what I'm doing, and if it's feeding my soul, then there's a good chance that it's going to connect with the audience that I have built over the years. And based on trust and a lot of content that I've put out, and it's all from the heart. So that to me is a big thing, and I'm finding that a lot of people are reacting very, very well to it. And so for me, it's helping to gauge how my audience feels about what I'm doing now. But like I say, I can walk away from SNS. I don't. The first thing I do in the morning when I get up is not open Twitter and see who's eaten what, or I don't follow people that post about what they're eating. It's like I follow people that feed my soul in some way.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I can, if I, probably because I'm in my mid-50s now, I find it harder to sleep than I used to. And so even like this morning, I'm opening my phone at like 6 a.m. and taking a look at stuff. I can find myself sitting there in bed while my wife's still asleep and crying because someone's talking about how they spoke to someone who's on a respirator, or it hooked up to a machine. They're pretty much in a coma, and yet this person's speaking to them because they know that there's a good chance that although everything else is shut down, their ears are still working and the brain is getting that conversation. And so it's feeding my soul. And that to me is a big thing about SNS. But I can walk away from it and not touch it for another week when I'm not engaged in that way. So that was a long way to get back to you about the question about SEO, but
Yeah.
that's sort of,
Well, you
yeah.
you said a couple really important things in there, and I think two that I want to just speak to. One is you're very aware that you do what you do, and you're not out there worrying about, oh, is my audience going to like this? You are you're aware of I think a very important reality that audiences choose themselves.
Mm,
Audiences will, if you are faithful to what you are doing and you understand, if it's feeding your soul, audiences will choose themselves. And yes, at some point, audiences, they change,
Mm.
the faithful listener of U2 might really enjoy the early stuff, and at a certain point go, you know what, they just don't do it for me anymore. That's fine,
Yeah.
because other people are going to. But the worst mistake Bono and gang can make is like, oh my God, Martin Bailey's not listening to us anymore, we should probably go back to the old
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Right, like we should probably stop changing and evolving and just do, put out a box set for Martin. Like that's the kiss of death for
Yeah.
any artist, is
Yeah.
not understanding that your audience chooses you.
Mm.
And then based on that decision, going, what are they getting out of this, and how can I engage with them, how can I serve them?
Mm.
The other thing that I thought was really interesting is that in terms of your use of SEO, is you understand that it's about relevance and that it's about a long-term kind of thing. And SEO has kind of been, I read somewhere once that someone compared it to like the bad comb over, the bad hair comb over of marketing. It's sort of like, because you've got all these other deficiencies and everything else isn't working, it's like, quick, fix my SEO. When the reality is, if you understand some of the tools that maybe non-techie people are never going to get into. And I think that's a strength. But if you're not that person and you're out there fretting about this, just understanding how SEO works. The spiders out there will index your site the more relevant it is, and the longer it is there. And so if you're putting out consistent content and people are linking back to it, and you're engaging with those comments, and you're in it for the long haul, right? It's not a quick fix like, oh my God, the bottom fell out of whatever it is I'm doing, I got to change my marketing. Changing your marketing has to happen like it's a long game. It has to have happened a year ago for it to really be making any difference now. And the other thing is that you're making really solid choices about your social. If you're going to be on social and rely on it, you've got to work it, right? In order for it to work, you've got to be on there at least twice a day, preferably using all of the most recent tools. So, in Instagram last year released like as a I don't know, a sequel or something to Stories. It's now Instagram Reels. And if you adopted that and started using Instagram Reels, you were immediately getting rewarded for that. Your posts were being seen by more people. The algorithm was favoring you. And if you were like me, content with just posting a picture and a couple comments a couple times a week, if you had something to say, the algorithm penalizes you. It's like, well, he's obviously not as relevant. And you will find right now they are saying that you're lucky to get on, and I'm speaking about the sort of the Facebook world. So Facebook and Instagram, you are lucky to get 3 to 7% of your audience that are following your stuff. 3 to 7% only are going to see your work as kind of like, that's your average. You're lucky if that's atrocious for the amount of time and energy people put on their social and that's not including ads. You could boost your posts and sponsor your posts and all of that, but who looks at that? If it's just organic reach, 3 to 7%. I mean, I don't even know anyone that's using email, which I think is the biggest missed opportunity. I don't know anyone that's using email really badly and isn't still getting like 10%, 15% open rates. So when you think about how social has changed and become, social, it doesn't exist for you and I, Martin. It exists for Mark Zuckerberg and his friends. And, so as a result, the minute you put a post up that says, hey, I've created some new work, check it out at martinbailey.com. The minute you put an outbound link to not social, Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg gets a call and he's like, oh, no, he doesn't, and he presses the red button, and Martin Bailey, I don't mean nobody, very few, even less people will see your comment linking to outside material. So I can understand why people are frustrated with it, because you put your heart and soul into it. As you said, you do this for your soul, and yet there's this gatekeeper going, yeah, I don't think so. You just put a book out and you think, well, I'll just tell people on Facebook, and Zuckerberg goes, I don't think so.
Well, the way that works now is, and you're 100% correct, of course, but the way it works now, and probably the big change that has really made it the way, the thing that you're sort of turning your back on to a degree, is that you've if you want people to see an outbound link now, you've got to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
Exactly.
that's the sad thing. I mean, it used to be, okay, I'm gonna work hard, I'm gonna do all of this stuff, and I'm gonna link back, and I mean, your audience that are directly connected and who are looking at a feed that you're you're a part of. There's a good chance that a number of them are going to see it. But really, the only way now to get your work out with outbound links is to pay for it.
Yeah.
Um, and I do think that there's still I mean, you said earlier about the sticking a fork in your eye, as opposed to rather than building a Facebook ad. I think that for a relatively small amount of money, you can reach a wider audience. But I don't know. I mean, of how much of that audience is actually going to come back and buy something from you.
Yeah.
People are, you pay to reach people. If a good percent of those people aren't going to actually buy something, then it's just wasted money. So
Yeah.
it's difficult. It's difficult to use that model now.
And you have to ask yourself, because you are right. You spend money on ads, and more people will see it, but it happens in a context that is not favorable for, in the marketing world, we use the word conversions, which drives me crazy. But it's not an inaccurate word in the sense of converting passivity into action. Someone who's just there, and you're converting in, they click a thing, they buy a thing, they do the thing you've asked them, they fill out a form or subscribe to it, whatever. But the real, I think the real concern for me, and one of the reasons I left, was because yes, you can do all that. The amount of time that it takes. I mean, I've got a manager who used to do my Facebook ads, and he knew this stuff, and I still found it confusing. Like unless you're willing to give a lot of time, unless you are like you, Martin, someone who's got strong technical inclinations, which a lot of artists don't. The idea of permeating the Facebook ad world is difficult, but you still have to ask yourself, is that ad on a medium that is good for converting to action? And it really isn't. I mean, certainly in the people that I've spoken to in photography specifically, it doesn't. People don't go to Facebook to do that kind of thing. They go to do the doom scroll. They go to just look and be entertained. And so the minute we see that it's a sponsored post or a boosted post, I think people's little radars kind of go up and they go, I don't know, I don't know if I want to click on that, or like, it's just, I'm not saying it can't be effective. And I know for some, if I was a woman selling handcrafted silver earrings and silver jewelry, I'd probably have a killer Instagram account, and I'd link it to like an Etsy store, and I'd probably do just fine. But for photographers, for most creatives, I guess what I've been trying to lead people towards is a sense that it is not the strongest foot forward in terms of building and engaging an audience. It can be one tool. And I think especially at the beginning, as you're trying to, you try to engage people, you're trying to find out maybe a little bit more about who your ideal audience is and why they come to you. I think great. And if you can still handle all the other kind of the disadvantages, like I found social a bit of a time suck. And so when I left, I suddenly had like 2 hours in a day that I could do actual productive stuff with. And, so a lot of it has to do with how you use the tool. But I just think there are other things we need to go. Like I said, whether you stay on it or not is not the point for me. It's that you're willing to embrace bigger possibilities and ask yourself, could I be getting a much higher return on investment, whether that's of my time, my focus, or my money, by also or predominantly being somewhere else? And I would say unreservedly, absolutely. You could be spending less time on this stuff, less time freaking out about, and the whole context of social, and many of us are prone to comparing ourselves with others, and it can be a bit of an emotional roller coaster. There are ways of serving an audience that are much more intimate, that are much higher conversion rates attached to them, and that are not quite the emotional roller coaster. And most here's what's I think one of the most important things is when you build your audience on any social platform. So let's say I'm a big fan of social, which I'm not, but let's say I was. Even if I was the most rabid fan, the big danger is building your house on someone else's land. You do not own that platform, and you don't own that audience or access to that audience. So you may have 100,000 people that are like, I am full on into Martin Bailey's stuff. And you're thinking, this is great. I love my Google Plus account. And then boom.
I was just thinking the same thing.
Right. And then it's gone.
Yeah.
And unless you did something to, which some people I'm sure did, but unless you did something on an ongoing long-term basis, not on the last minute, like, oh my God, G Plus is disappearing, but unless you did something strategically on a long-term basis to migrate people from that platform, which is borrowed or rented at best, to your own platform where you can control the engagement, where you can directly speak to them when you want to, how you want to, you can link them to what you want. And it's also a much stronger conversion. I think the number one thing that creators of all stripes need to be thinking about, if an audience is of concern to you, and it might not be, is how do you move them? How do you move that audience that loves what you do and wants more of it onto a platform of your own that no matter what happens to Facebook, because let's face it, Facebook could change their terms of service tomorrow and you'd be like, oh, I'm not willing to be part of that anymore. Or you might be willing to, but your audience suddenly goes, I'm out, right? And it does not take much for all of a sudden for the business plan or the terms of service of people running these platforms. They might do really well for you. You might have a killer YouTube channel and all of a sudden the business model changes and you're left going, well, what do I do now? And if you are still serving those people, but you are also consistently moving them, I call it the VIP room. If you're consistently moving them to a platform that you control, that is, again, more intimate, and you don't lose. I mean, the worst thing that can happen when you're speaking to and engaging your audience on email, the worst thing that's going to happen is Gmail might throw some of your emails into into a promoted emails tab or something like that. But they're still generally speaking going to get it, and stack up an open rate, an average good open rate of 25 to 40% on emails. Stack that up against 3 to 7% of your audience seeing it on Facebook. In a context where when people read emails, unless they just delete them, they do give their time to it. They're not in a context where they're currently scrolling to see something else. They open it, they give their attention to it. It is a much higher engagement kind of process because it's just a more intimate medium. So, I guess I'm not really hating on social. As a creative person, I don't like it. But in part, I think that's just because it changed so much that I'm like, it used to be so good. And now it's just, it's just not the tool for me. But if you're sure that you love social and it's working for you, just don't let it be the only way that you engage and grow your audience, because that's where, to come back to all of this, yes, things have changed, but if your audience, so a couple of years ago, Martin, I was, as you well know, I run a publishing house called Craft and Vision. I was selling ebooks. I was making my living selling ebooks. And then all of a sudden people's appetites changed, and my best customers, my most loyal fans were saying, we love your stuff, but man, I've got an iPad full of your books I'll never get to. Like, there's just too many. I've got Craft and Vision, including some of your books. We had at the peak, we had like 100 ebooks titles in our catalog. And so you imagine this, you've got photographers that have got 100 ebooks, and they're like, when am I going to ever read all of these, right? And so the sales dropped off, and at a certain point I went, you know what? I'm still in the education business in this part of what I do, but the ebooks are not going to do it for me. But because what was most important to me, my biggest business asset was to put it in really plain talk, was the mailing list that represents, the ability for me to touch and reach that audience. I could turn around and say, okay, I can still serve them with something that will be valuable to them. And I started doing courses, and that has been when the bottom was falling out and I was wringing my hands and waking up like you waking up, looking in the mirror and like literally just like collapsing in fear. I could turn and adjust my business model. I could, in the language of the day, pivot.
Mm.
And if you can always pivot, if you have a real sense of here's why people come to me. Here's maybe they're not buying big wall prints right now, but maybe they're buying books. Maybe they're buying, is there something else? So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, everything I did is now changed, I would just urge you to go back to the basics. Do whatever else you're doing. And that's fine. Do it on social, do whatever. But go back to the basics and ask yourself, why do people come to me? What longings am I fulfilling? What desires, what needs am I meeting through what I do? It could be a feeling. It could be, we all do, whether you're a poet or a musician, we're basically trafficking in feelings and experiences. And if you can be very clear on who you are to your audience, and you have a way to reach them and to serve them and to engage with them, to ask them, hey, if you're struggling right now and you do have an audience, when's the last time you sent an email that said, how can I serve you better? How can I, not like, oh, well, then they're going to answer me and I'm going to have to change everything I do. And it still has to be authentic to you. It still has to feed your soul. That's why they come to you. But they may suggest something that you had no idea was even possible. They may say, well, gosh, I'd love to get you in front of my camera club. Just that one idea, Martin, getting myself in front of camera clubs, because I'm asking myself, where are other people, these audiences of mine, where are their friends? Where are other people like these? They're in camera clubs. And all of a sudden there's camera clubs that can't meet. They can't, even if they were, they maybe couldn't afford to bring me in, to fly me from Canada just to, do an hour and a half presentation. But now they can. And there are ways, but again, unless you are engaging with your audience, how would you seize that opportunity? And then how would you say to your most loyal fans, hey, check out, I registered a site called inspireyourcameraclub.com. I couldn't believe it was available, but I registered it. And so I can send an email to my audience and say, if you're part of a camera club and you'd like to introduce them to me, send whoever does these meetings, send them to inspireyourcameraclub.com. And I'm full, my calendar's full of bookings to speak at camera clubs. There's still room, but I'm having to push out the dates a little bit further. And, but that's only possible. That's only really, truly possible with the kind of intimate engagement that you have on mediums that are, that are more personal, that aren't social, and being willing to kind of, because, if I put something on social, very few people, unless I start running ads and but all I had to do was send a couple emails to my audience and say, I'm offering this and hoping that it serves your needs. Of course, you say it in different language. You're basically saying, I made this for you. I made an experience for you that I'm hoping will meet your needs. And would you share it with, whoever? And the amount of people that have been like, I've been waiting for something like this for so long. And on the other, here's what's beautiful about this. The lecture is based on that book that I told you launched on the first day of the pandemic. I've created a virtual, I'm not trying to sell the book. I'm just letting people know that the content that I talk about in the lecture is more fully addressed in the book. So I don't try to pitch the book. I give away a couple ebooks so everyone gets high value. But so I've not only have I made some money on it, not only have I reached a whole new audience, and in the presentation, I give them a way to get on my mailing list and get a couple of ebooks that normally I'd charge like $42 for. So they're getting, my mailing list is growing. There's money coming in, and I'm reaching a whole new audience. And on top of that, my publisher's thrilled because I'm actually selling books. People are going to Amazon. I don't make anything. I make like $2 a copy or something, but Amazon's thrilled. They're making money, but it's all of this kind of to say, if I could say one thing to people that are kind of wringing their hands a little, and certainly the pandemic has changed things. It's made us a little more aware of how vulnerable we are. And by that, I mean our businesses as well as our physical well-being. But if you can shift your thinking from this, I hate to, because if we hate doing marketing, you're not going to do it, and you're not going to do it with your whole heart. It's not going to feed your soul. I found a way to do so-called marketing, and I reframe it as building and engaging an audience, but it feeds my soul. I wake up in the morning, and the first emails I get are, oh, I just read your latest thing and I want to tell you how it changed my life. I just listened to your podcast while my wife was taking a nap because she's going through chemo right now, because of, I like the intimacy that is happening with, I get a lot more email now. So that 2 hours I saved by not being on social, I'm spending it answering, but they're personal emails. They're people that are like pouring their guts out to me. And that connection, and I'm never going to forget them. When I get the next email, I'm going to be like, oh, I remember Steve. Steve told me this about his, and that is like, I don't want to be pragmatic about it because I'm not doing it for that, but it's gold. Like that's how the best businesses in the world have made their money, by earning trust. You've said that a couple times in this conversation, earning trust and engaging and bringing so-called marketing back to this profoundly human activity of offering people value and giving them invitations to experience more of what you make. It's really not that complicated. It requires a lot of hard work and creativity, but it doesn't require you to be an expert in SEO. It doesn't require you to figure out Facebook. Not to simplify it, it kind of just requires you to send an old-fashioned letter to people by email rather than in the post. I mean, because imagine handwriting all those emails or all those letters, and your tongue would be worn out just from licking stamps. But the ability to reach an audience on a much deeper human level has been profoundly. It's what I've built my business on, and. We're like you, we're down from last year in a way that, kind of makes my eyes water a little bit. But the last few years, we've been smart with our money. We've been able to pay our taxes and save. And so, yes, this has hurt, but at the same time, we still have a relatively thriving business, and people are still, my mailing list is still growing. My engagement is growing. And while I have a little bit less in my bank account, imagine the people that are struggling to find their rent right now and wondering, God, how am I going to pay the bills? So I'm very grateful for that. And I have now just spoken way, way too long. So I'm going to take a breath and let you chime in.
Not at all.
Sorry about that. I get very excited about this stuff. I got to say.
And that comes across, and that in itself is golden. So I'm sitting here, like I said earlier, I love talking with you, and you always sort of give me a different perspective. The thing that I love about the conversations that we have is that you help me, and I said this about how with photography, you gave modern photographers a vocabulary with most of your books. Well, I say most. That sounds like some of them were crap, but that's not the case.
Well, let's be honest. Not everything can be done.
Well, the most there was that probably I was thinking that some of your books are teaching and some of them are art. And the art ones give people beautiful art. The teaching ones give us a vocabulary. And I'm sitting here thinking that the same sort of thing. I do a lot of things instinctively, and I realized as you were speaking there that I don't really like the analogy I'm going to use, but I feel as though I've built an audience that is kind of like a swarm of bees, and they're not busy like swarming around fanatically. That's not what I mean. But if I take myself to a different place, I find the same people gradually swarming across. And so when I was on Google Plus, the people that I had meaningful conversations with were the people that I've also had meaningful conversations with on other platforms and also by email. And, so I'm sitting here thinking that, yeah, okay, I've been on various places. The majority of people that I communicate with are the same people in different places. And so I feel as though the cornerstone of all of this for me has been from the very start has been my podcast. And so doing that regularly has been something that has helped me to build everything pretty much that I have. It's my wife said to me, you mentioned earlier that doing marketing and you have to have started a year ago to get results now. I remember in the first year of business that when I first quit my day job, I'd be up in the office every day working hard, and then I go downstairs, and what I do, I sit on the sofa working hard. And so it's like my wife would say to me, you're working 16, 18 hours a day. When's the money going to start coming in? And I'm like, she said, show me what you're doing and how that relates to a certain amount of money coming in. And I said to her, that's not how it works. It's like what I'm doing now may never directly result in a dollar arriving in our PayPal account. I said, but it will result in people finding my tours better and people finding my products more easily because of the benefits of the SEO and the links that come in, and the benefits of having relatively regular content is going to help me to reach other people. And so the reach that I've found, as you say, I mean, it's the audience that has built around what I've been doing, and just continuing to do that. I mean, there are weeks when I sit down and I think to myself, what am I going to talk about this week? I've got nothing to talk about. But then I'll pick up a microscope, and all of a sudden I've got a few more weeks of posts to put out, and I'm feeding my soul at the same time. So I'm doing things organically that have, I mean, I called my podcast the Martin Bailey Photography Podcast instead of something catchy. I did that in some ways to my detriment, because I know that some people are going to say, okay, I'm not going to follow that. He's just talking about himself. And that's not the case. I'm talking about what I'm doing in photography in a way that helps people with their photography and hopefully to a degree with their creative lives. And so it's built me an audience that has been, I think, very loyal in many ways. But it's also, over the years, I've not been stupid. I've also built a mailing list. And so my email list is, I mean, I send out an email to everyone that is registered for blog posts, notifications. They get an email each week. And as you were saying, a lot of the time, one of the things where people will get in touch with me more than anything is I'll just get a quick email saying that was a great I don't actually fill the email. The email goes with a featured photo and a few words about what I've just posted on the blog. So again, it's sending people back to the blog. And that again helps SEO, because Google sees people moving around the ether, into all of the various places. So it's kind of building back into itself, feeding back into itself. But those email that I get about the post, the email that I send out are amazing, because it shows me that I'm sometimes doing the right thing. It keeps me in touch with an audience that I value highly. I remember speaking a few years ago with someone, and they were talking about when you build your email list, don't ask for names, because I've always asked I used to ask for first and last name. Now the first name is necessary, the last name is optional, and sure, that results in some people saying, I'm not going to give you my name. But if someone can't give me at least their first name, how much trust is there in that relationship? And again, I mean, you might have different opinions on this. That's fine. But I feel that I may have built a smaller email list, but it's with people that at least trust me enough to give me their name. And so I've found that really valuable, and it's kept me closer to the audience that I've built. And so I'm sitting here, I'm listening to your sort of semi monologue there about all of this, and I'm nodding to myself. I'm sitting here thinking, yeah, okay, great, you're doing this right. And for me, that's really valuable, because I do a lot of what I do in a vacuum. And so when I talk with you and you say things like what you've just said, I'm sitting here nodding, thinking, okay, great, this is great. You're doing things right. Because I feel as though I've sort of organically and instinctively put myself in a position that I feel is very much in line with what you've arrived at as well. And so it's really valuable for me to hear what you're saying, And it wasn't monotonous or anything in that way. It was great. Literally, I really enjoyed what you just said. So that's all good stuff. I feel as though I'm doing things right. The one thing that I know I've got to do a better job of is to communicate more with the people that have not necessarily registered for blog notifications. I don't send out enough email to my general audience that just want to find out what I'm up to. And so that's probably something that I need to put more effort into.
Yeah, I would encourage anyone that has a mailing list. I actually I was just writing something about this for another project that I'm doing called the Audience Academy, and which you can find if you're interested at theaudienceacademy.com. There's my marketing pitch. Good pitch. I was just writing, but I was writing a thing that about this very thing. I know artists because I do consulting, because I do coaching, and frankly, just because this is my world. The only people I know are artists and creators of some kind, and I know people that have got mailing lists of hundreds and thousands of people that have said, "I want you to stay in touch with me. I want more of what you make in whatever form that is, whether it's a blog post, or I want to see more of your art, or be apprised of educational opportunities, whatever." There are people out there that have said, not only am I open to, I'm not just giving you permission, I am asking you to send me an email. And they have spent the last year, I'm thinking of a couple people in particular that have sent nothing over the last year of pandemic. Nothing. And so you imagine let's say you have 1,000 people on the mailing list that have said, "I want more of what you make." And you haven't reached out and said, "Here's something that I created." I haven't created anything. Just like everyone else, I'm in a funk, and here's why. Some kind of personal connection, just once a month, just once. I mean, I think once a month is a little too infrequently for me, but just the opportunity to reach out and really, I mean, touch other people and say, "I'm here. You're not alone. Here's something I made for you." And you can do this whether you're a comedian, whether you're a photographer, whether you're doing business to business or person to person, because even B2B sales are still person to person. You're still talking to individual humans that are coming to you for certain things, to fill certain needs, certain longings, whatever. And if you miss the opportunity over the span of a year, a tough year at that, to say, "I care and I'm here, and like you, I'm struggling to make it. But if I can, I often will just say, you know where to find me. If you want to reach out, if you want to, on the end of my podcast, A Beautiful Anarchy, I will say, this conversation's a little bit one-sided, but if you ever want to flip the script, if you ever want to talk to me, ask a question, tell me a story, here's how to get to me." And that personal touch, almost once a day, I get an email just from that one thread of someone reaching out and saying, "Thanks for what you do," and telling me a story. And I cannot, when in a world where all of this has become so, there's ads and there's algorithms and it's so overwhelming. If all you do is come back to the humanity of this and say, "I can, with an email today, I can send something to 1,000 people that have asked me to do so. I can send them something great." So I like with my audience, only my email subscribers. So my blog people don't get this, because I've promised my email audience that I will send them something specific, and exclusive. So when I do new work, or in the case of the pandemic, I've gone back. I did one on Hokkaido, Martin, our couple tours together. I reimagined what that might look like as a body of work. And I sent out a PDF, a really nicely laid out PDF of a Hokkaido monograph, and just said, I haven't traveled for a while. I'm pretty uninspired, but maybe this will inspire you. And the amount of emails I get just saying, "God, it was beautiful just to see something new. It was, I can't travel right now. It was so great." And it cost me nothing. I just, I put together a PDF in InDesign. It took me a couple of days because I kind of thoughtful about it. I didn't just mail it in, and then I included it. And I've got probably a dozen of those that on a regular basis, because I get new subscribers, I just put a couple at the bottom of my email and go, just if you're looking for some inspiration, here's something. And I often will get people, because that's not educational, but people will send me a thing and say, God, I'd love to know how you did that. Like, I want to do something. You've inspired me to do something with my photographs. How can I make a monograph like that? It all comes back to that human thing, Martin. If we can just remember that and that's why, to go all the way back to the beginning, it's why I object to this idea of, marketing and, the market won't do this or the market won't pay this. It's not a market. There are no markets. There are individual people. And if you can look at them as individual people, if you can look at them as audiences that gather around your work and want more of what you do, it becomes so much easier to serve them, to engage them, to use the word, to love them, and those are the people that are going to stick around. I get, again, come back to my email. I get emails all the time going, David, I'm a 70-year-old man and I've been doing photography for longer than you've been alive. And I've been getting your emails for 12 years and I read every single one of them. Thanks for what you do. That tells me that I'm doing. So that's not a result of marketing. Right. That's a result of people touching people. And it's, to go back to, your idea of, I do this to make my soul happy. If you can make your soul happy while doing this very deeply pragmatic stuff, your business will grow. Your income will grow.
I'm infinitely happier after this hour of conversation than I was when I started. And I wasn't unhappy. I wasn't unhappy when I started. But what I mean is that you've really, again, I'm repeating myself here, but everything you've said today has helped me to understand that I'm not just banging my head against a wall. It's, and my instincts have served me well. So what I'm going to do, I'm not going to try to say anything about what you just said. You've said it all perfectly. And I understand that we've been talking for an hour and 10 minutes now, so I don't want to keep you much longer. What I do want to just reiterate is you just mentioned where your theaudienceacademy.com is the URL that you just mentioned.
That's right.
Is there anywhere else that you would like to send people to connect, or is that it?
Yeah, the two things that the one thing at the very beginning you asked, what have I been occupied with? About just before this all started, I asked myself, do I want to do a podcast? And the answer was abso-friggin-lutely not. But then I started thinking, because I couldn't do what you do. I just don't have the questions. I'm the world's worst interviewer. But then I thought, what I really want, because I'm not a podcast guy. I don't listen to a lot of podcasts. I'm very spotty at best, very sporadic. But I thought, if I could do a 15-minute, at the most, a 15-minute creative kick in the pants for photographers and other creators, makers, and artists about the creative life, and you've just basically said that the last hour, it gave you hope. And I think hope is so missing these days, especially for those of us who are doing, we're kind of lone rangers. We kind of do what we do in isolation. It is nice to have a voice that says, you know what, you're not alone if you're struggling with this. And so I take issues about the joys and challenges, mostly the challenges and resulting joys of the creative life. And I put that out 3 times a month as A Beautiful Anarchy, stealing the title shamelessly from my book of the same name. But it's given those ideas that were in that book a life beyond themselves. So I would love it if this hour has given you some hope and if you feel more connected to the idea of, doing things that make your soul happy, then even if you've got all the way through this and you're like, yeah, but I don't do this for a living. And the idea of, engaging an audience is not really your thing. I would love to introduce you to A Beautiful Anarchy, and you can find that on iTunes or literally any of the podcast places, or you can go to abeautifulanarchy.com. And I would just love it if I would know that was serving you in some way, because I really do think that creative people, we get so kind of into our own thoughts and into our own world, and we sometimes wonder, like you said, I feel like I'm banging my head against the wall. I think if we all got together and said, I've kind of felt that way, or, it's just nice to know we're not alone. And that's what a beautiful anarchy is about. And it's what the Audience Academy is about too. It's just more about you're not alone. If you find this so-called marketing stuff a little challenging, here's a way to make it more human.
Excellent. Well, you've definitely made it very human today, David. I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you.
I can't believe that. I mean, I feel as though I could sit here for another 3 hours, but I understand that it's your evening. There's whiskey awaiting, and the probably going to just sit now and edit this and push it out today. So we'll start to wrap it up there. I can't wait. Hopefully not another 3 years, but I can't wait to have another chat.
I'd like that too.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure. Is there anything else that you wanted to leave us with, or
no? I'm just so grateful for the chance to talk to you again. It's been, as you say, it has been far too long, and some point in the not too distant future, we need to do this in person over a bottle of sake or a bottle of whiskey. So thanks so much for giving me the opportunity to spend time with you again.
Not at all. It's always a pleasure, David, and I definitely have enjoyed the last hour very, very much. So thank you for your time. We'll catch up again pretty soon.
I can't wait.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Martin.
I'm sure you can tell, but I really did enjoy that conversation with David. So I've put the links and everything into a post at mbp.ac/741 as usual. And I do recommend that you check out the resources that David talked about. The Audience Academy is going to be very, very special. And his podcast, A Beautiful Anarchy, is another resource that really is something to dig your teeth into. So please check those out. Thanks very much for listening today. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share a link with your friends. Subscribe in iTunes or your favorite podcast program to ensure uninterrupted delivery. If you have a moment to rate the podcast or leave us a review in iTunes, that helps to keep us relevant in the huge number of podcasts out there now. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and links to everything that I'm up to are at martinbaileyphotography.com, so do drop by and take a look. I'll be back next week with another episode, but in the meantime, you take care and have a great week, whatever you're doing. Bye-bye.